And in the waning years of her life, Jon Meacham, she was, as she has always been, almost a force of nature, of a force of stability, of consistency in a country that in recent years, like in many places around the world, faced so many challenges, Brexit, the economic challenges that came with that, COVID. I think of that incredibly poignant picture of her after her husband, Prince Philip, of 73 years, died. She sat by herself at his funeral in St. George's Chapel because of the restrictions brought on by coronavirus. But that has to be part of her legacy, that stability, the consistency that she gave to her country, her people, and frankly, the world.
One of the fascinating elements of monarchy in all of human experience is this combination of the human and the elevated, the human and the divine. There's a moment in the coronation where, when the oil is put on the monarch, they become demigods. And so there's a magic to this, there's a superstition, if you will, but it's an ancient rite. You know, Shakespeare said, what have kings that privates have not too, save ceremony, general ceremony, in sort of a moment of almost self-pitying from a Shakespearean king. But ceremony, general ceremony, is in many ways what sets human experience apart and at a higher plane. And she did all of that extremely well for decade after decade. And you think of, as you say, the number of crises, the elements of storm and strife she faced. Again, born in the Roaring '20s. Her path is set during the Great Depression. She's 14 years old during the Blitz. As her mother is reputed to have said when she was asked if the princesses and the king and the King George and that Queen Elizabeth were going to leave Buckingham Palace, she said, the girls will not leave without me, I will not leave without the king, and the king shall never leave London. And that spirit was imbued and transferred to her daughter. The Cold War, you go through the tumult of the 1960s, in Britain in particular, the complexities and the bleakness in many ways of the 1970s, a certain renaissance, though controversial, in the 1980s, and then a kind of a tabloid era, let's be honest here. Monarchs are both mirrors and makers of a nation's manners and morals. And in many ways, the Queen was this embodiment of the best a nation, the best a family could be. But like all of us, not every day was great. And she dealt with the vicissitudes of family life and did it with a kind of dignity and grace that I think, again, is worth emulating. A constitutional monarchy is a very complicated thing. We live in an age of democracy. We have for almost 250 years in the West. And yet there's this person who is there by inheritance. We fought a revolution here so that we would not be subject to the divine rights of monarchs. But not least because of Elizabeth II. They have managed to find a path that takes the best of what a monarchy can do. It can be a unifying symbol. It can have a substantive role in her human interactions with the statesmen and women of the age, and have a kind of beacon, a kind of buoy in the storms of the present. At the funeral of Edward VII, who was before this, I think, the longest-serving heir apparent. This is in the beginning of Barbara Tuchman's great book about the beginning of World War I. They're watching the 1911, all the crowned heads of Europe, many of whom would lose their thrones in the chaos and bloodshed and carnage of the First World War. And an observer says, there never was such a breakup. All the buoys which have marked the channels of our lives have been blown away. But Elizabeth II stayed in place.